Well, we all have our tastes, our personal tastes. Our very favorite thing. Whether it be a certain type of food, or a type of music, a particular band, or whatever it might be. In my case, it's science fiction, sci-fi. That's my thing, or one of them anyway. That's at the top of my list. I don't know if it happened at the same time in each of our lives, when we gradually or suddenly discovered what particular genre we were really into. But when I was a little kiddie, and of a certain age, I knew, while watching TV, that right there. That, whatever it was that I was watching on the TV right then. That's it. That is what I'm into. Science fiction. It makes me feel good. I can get into it, it captures my imagination. It's escapism. And a bunch of other stuff I can't really put into words right now. But yep. I just want some more of that, please, thank you. So we all have our particular thing? Not everybody likes science fiction. Hard to believe, right? In fact, a lot of people thoroughly dislike it. And that's what this short little video is all about. I've been perusing a bunch of views from the pages of Reddit, and this is just a little of what I found there.
In my experience, people who dislike sci-fi are afraid of stepping outside the cultural norm. Sci-fi is just not cool, and probably never will be. It's a shame, really, to dismiss an entire genre out of fear of being labeled. I mean, if you're in high school, fine, I understand and certainly remember how it felt to be mocked every day for being different. But if you're an adult and avoid sci-fi because it's nerdy, grow up, you know?
The people in my life that dislike sci-fi are the ones that aren't very interested and are savvy in terms of technology and science. I believe the most important and appealing thing about science fiction, that it holds over fantasy in my opinion, is the intriguing idea of this could happen. This is what our future might look like. In order to understand that and be intrigued by it, you need to be able to make the connection between the present state of the world and the things depicted in a sci-fi story, which is hard if you don't know much about technology, its capabilities, and the directions it's developing to.
I'll never say this to their faces, but in most cases the people who I know who sneer at sci-fi are also the people I know who have the least imagination.
When I was young, my brother would make fun of Star Trek anytime he found me watching it. Every time an actress appeared on screen, he would say, "Look at that intergalactic space hussy."
I think a lot of people also disdain wild escapism, and it's easy to label sci-fi that way. Because they allow themselves to have no imagination. I imagine many adults simply think it's juvenile, silly names and costumes, space battles and monsters.
My family thinks it's childish.
I've been slowly weaning my girlfriend onto some sci-fi, but it's not really her thing. She greatly prefers fantasy. She finds the settings of forests and magic and horses and the like much more appealing than a metal tube flying through space. So there may be some gender divide on it just in terms of the setting.
Science fiction, like most fiction, usually requires some suspension of disbelief to various levels for it to work. Some people just don't like suspending disbelief of the tropes of science fiction because it takes them too far from the world they're comfortable with. It doesn't help that the disbelief has to be willing because the fantastic elements are usually so obvious, and that they have do it for multiple different concepts. Fantasy has the same or even bigger hurdles, except its saving grace is that most people are introduced to fantasy concepts as children, in fairy tales and children's movies.
With the popularity of video games and sci-fi cartoons and series, plus the resurgence of comic book movies and actually palatable sci-fi like Inception, I think we'll find less and less initial resistance to sci-fi as time goes on.
I've gotten my wife to read some sci-fi and fantasy, but it's been hard going. My tastes tend towards good world building and big questions like the meaning of life or is there a god, etc. The kind of thing that sci-fi and fantasy do well. She wants to read long and engrossing stories about real and detailed characters where the plot is driven by the characters and their flaws, strengths, passions, etc. To give you an idea, her favorite author is John Irving, who writes exactly like that.
It's repetitive.
To me, it's just boring.
So I'm going to get a lot of flack for this one, but I don't care for sci-fi. Partly because I'm not one to enjoy artillery, guns, advanced military tactics, and wanton destruction of things that probably took a lot of effort to build. In fantasy, a war is bloody, messy, and you can visualize a sword fight in 1,000 different ways. Gunfights in comparison feel like, I shoot at you and you shoot at me until one of us hits. You can wage terrible, high-cost wars in fantasy, but you're not going to crack planets with immeasurable loss of life and biodiversity, threatening the balance of the rest of the star system. Maybe for me, it's the impersonal, distant, and often dull style of combat, and the almost clinical cruelty that is used to justify what would be considered immoral acts today.
Personally, I find it impossible to suspend my disbelief so that I can enjoy it. At work last night, The Fifth Element was playing on the staff room TV. I started watching and thought, hey, this actually looks alright. Then suddenly some monster-looking things flying spaceship stuff appeared, and it ruined it for me. I just can't get into movies where you have to suspend your disbelief so much.
I was forced to go to the cinemas to watch Avatar and The Force Awakens, and on both occasions I lamented the fact that I didn't have a cyanide pill handy.
Star Wars isn't really science fiction, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. It's a sword and sorcery space opera.
I'm not a fan of most science fiction either, especially anything made by Gene Roddenberry, aside from the original Star Wars stuff, which most people tend to have some level of appreciation for, and the Dune movie, which is too off the wall to really hate. The only science fiction I tend to like is cyberpunk. Even then, though, it's mostly because of its similarity to film noir and crime/espionage thrillers, rather than any relation it has to traditional sci-fi.
Writing in general for television and film has gone down the shitter. It's like writers these days can't be bothered to even attempt to make their stories or character arcs coherent. It doesn't help that many writers these days seem less interested in telling compelling stories than they are in putting their own baggage on screen.
For quality sci-fi, I mostly stick to novels now. For example, basically anything by Adrian Tchaikovsky, Alastair Reynolds, Ian M. Banks, or Peter F. Hamilton will be a story worth your time. Even relative fluff from authors like John Scalzi, Andy Weir, or Martha Wells is better than 95% of what is on television and film these days.
Yes, bad writing is industry-wide, however, so it's not just exclusively a problem with sci-fi. Shows like Star Trek are so egregious, some plots seem like the writer conceived it as a clap back to the haters in their replies, or to a thing of the week they posted about on Twitter. Clearly showing no real interest or passion for the genre, rather it's just dressing for whatever insufferable grievances the writers want to air, only this time, in space.
That said, there was a long period after Battlestar Galactica ended that space opera seemed to be a genre that was never going to return. Now that we have quite a few, fortunately, every so often we luck out, and somehow good writers manage to make their way into a production, and we end up with an Expanse, an Orville, or even at least a somewhat bland but watchable, not obnoxiously preachy show like Foundation. Not fed up, just habitually disappointed, and simultaneously insulted. I always thought I was a liberal guy, until I just see time after time after time that these older franchises are being hijacked, with shallow and cynical attempts at diversity and inclusion. How they can all be total trash writing and absolutely ignore all the great strong diverse characters that already existed in sci-fi. And they were massively groundbreaking and awesome. It's just so distasteful. For example, Finn could have been an awesome gay black Jedi hero. Instead, we got two lame white characters, and just Finn, stuck on as a symbolic gesture, with his character basically caricatured. Hollywood absolutely doesn't care about true representation or diversity. It also absolutely refuses to do anything new, and wants to subvert everything established. Then why not just make something new? It's destructive. In sci-fi there needs to be fear or wonder. These TV series/film franchises are all about dull humans. The intrigue. The interpersonal issues. It's not sci-fi. They talk and talk and talk in rooms with pipes and light flares, and it's dishonest soap opera. Maybe this reflects our times, but damn, I'm sick of it. These shows are made by people who don't like sci-fi. For them it's a dumb gesture, a genre, a money grab. It only makes me think of thoughtless indifferent execs without vision conducting endless Zoom calls about proving they have some legitimate function, grinding down anything that might be exciting.
I don't care for hard sci-fi and high fantasy books. They focus on the technicalities, the settings, the system which I'm not interested in. My reading list is mostly classic mysteries and historical fiction. I hate sci-fi shows that work to their budget and/or time constraints. Yeah, we get it, bumpy forehead aliens aren't realistic. But the audience can empathize with them and it's cheap for the costume department. Likewise, Earth-like scenery, homogeneous costumes, and artificial gravity. If none of these things is central to the plot, then spending time on them is a complete waste. Mostly complains about spaceships. Ships that have a top and bottom. When every ship in a scene has their top facing the same way, as if up means something. Ships coming to a stop without any reverse thrust, as if friction was a thing. When two spaceships interact, whether in battle or otherwise, they are way too close to each other. Even in the interactions between two naval ships today, you keep more distance than that.
When you watch sci-fi, you know what you're gonna get. 1. The chosen one, or messiah figure, who is destined to save the world. 2. The mad scientist character who disregards all ethical considerations in pursuit of knowledge. 3. The evil corporation that prioritizes profit over people or the environment. 4. The alien invasion plot, where extraterrestrial beings threaten Earth's existence. And 5. The dystopian future scenario, where society has collapsed due to technological or environmental catastrophe. That's all of science fiction for you. I don't like it.
So, there you are. That's just a small sample of the stuff I grabbed from Reddit. Just to add my little conclusion here, the criticism I've most come across goes like this. You really like that science fiction stuff? Aren't you too old for that? That stuff's for kids. You should have grown out of that by now. Or, that's made for children. Anyway. But as was mentioned in one of the comments earlier, if you find yourself in the wrong kind of company or social circles, you're probably gonna get ridiculed or looked at with disdain. 'Cause no matter how popular science fiction is at the movie theater or on TV, some people really do have a strong downer on the whole genre and on the people that like it. And that includes a lot of TV and movie critics who just don't get it and never will. Anyway, till next time, here's a bunch more spaceships and stuff.